The Kansas wind, a restless spirit itself, whispered through the nascent prairie grasses as the 19th century drew to a close. In Atchison, a small, quiet town cradled by the Missouri River, a different kind of restlessness was stirring. Amelia Mary Earhart, born in a grand, three-story Gothic revival home on July 24, 1897, was not destined for the hushed domesticity that society often prescribed for girls of her era. Her early years were a kaleidoscope of shifting landscapes and unconventional freedoms. The scent of cut grass and damp river earth mingled with the faint, sweet aroma of her grandmother's rose garden, a scent that would forever anchor her to a childhood defined less by static roots and more by a budding, untamed curiosity. Her parents, Amy and Edwin Earhart, though well-meaning, offered a childhood that oscillated between periods of comfortable stability and sudden, unsettling upheaval. Young Amelia, or Mealy, as her younger sister Muriel was known, found solace and adventure outdoors. She wasn't content with dolls and tea parties. Instead, she scaled trees, built rudimentary roller coasters from old planks and boxes, and explored the wilder edges of her world with a fearless spirit. Her dress was often smudged with dirt, her knees perpetually scraped, a testament to her preference for action over delicate refinement. She observed the world with keen, intelligent eyes, absorbing details, questioning norms. The rustle of her grandmother's starched skirts, the clatter of a horse-drawn buggy on cobblestones, the distant, mournful whistle of a train, these were the sounds of a fading era. But Amelia was already reaching for something new, something faster, something unbound. The year 1908, when Amelia was a girl of 11, brought a seismic, if initially unacknowledged, shift. The Iowa State Fair, the air hummed with the collective excitement of thousands, a cacophony of barkers' cries, the joyful screams from dizzying rides, and the sweet, greasy scent of roasting peanuts and spun sugar. But it was a different spectacle that drew a particular kind of hushed awe. Perched precariously on a rickety wooden platform, like a fragile insect caught in a spider's web, was a biplane. It was a crude, flimsy contraption of wood, wire, and canvas, utterly alien against the vast, blue Midwestern sky. Amelia, standing with her father, felt no immediate surge of inspiration. Her first impression was one of clumsy awkwardness. It was a thing of rusty wire and wood and not at all interesting, she would later recall, the words betraying a nascent, almost subconscious dismissal. Yet, something lingered. As the pilot coaxed the machine into the air, a sputtering, defiant ascent, a faint tremor, not of fear but of recognition, stirred within her. The engine coughed, the propeller whirred into a blur, and the ungainly machine climbed, however briefly, above the mundane. She watched it with an observant, restless gaze, a subtle shift occurring in the quiet chambers of her mind. The world, she realized, could be seen from a different vantage point. The seed was planted, dormant for a time, but irrevocably there. The years that followed were marked by further disruptions. Financial struggles plagued her father, leading to frequent moves, disrupting Amelia's education and forcing her to adapt, to cultivate an inner resilience. She attended several high schools, never quite settling, always observing, learning. It was a period of intellectual awakening, where her natural curiosity found expression in reading, in independent study, in developing a keen, analytical mind. She was drawn to science and medicine, paths that promised utility and a tangible contribution to the world. Then came the Great Flu pandemic of 1918. The world, already reeling from the Great War, was plunged into a new, unseen battle. Toronto, where Amelia was living, became a city of muffled coughs and hushed despair. The vibrant streets quieted, replaced by the grim procession of ambulances and the pervasive, antiseptic smell of hospitals. Amelia, then a young woman of 21, volunteered as a nurse's aide at the Spadina Military Hospital. The experience was harrowing, a stark confrontation with mortality. The endless rows of beds, the feverish faces, the desperate struggle for breath, the constant, weary battle against an invisible enemy. The air was thick with the scent of carbolic and illness, a heavy shroud that settled over everything. She witnessed courage and fragility in equal measure, tending to soldiers returning from the war, only to fall prey to a different kind of horror. The work was relentless, emotionally draining, yet it forged in her a profound sense of purpose, a quiet strength that would define her later life. It deepened her compassion, but also her understanding of the precious, fleeting nature of existence, perhaps fueling a desire to live each moment with audacious intent. It was in Long Beach, California, in 1920, that the dormant seed finally germinated. A visit to an air show with her mother proved transformative. This time, the planes were more sophisticated, the pilots more daring. As she watched the aerial ballet, the grace and power of the machines captivated her. The roar of the engines was no longer just noise, it was a symphony of possibility. The crisp California air, carrying the scent of oil and exhaust, felt invigorating. A 10-minute ride, offered by a barnstormer named Frank Hawks, cost $10, a significant sum for Amelia at the time. But the moment she lifted off the ground, leaving the earth behind, everything clicked into place. The ground fell away, the world below shrinking into an intricate tapestry of fields and houses. The wind whipped her hair, the engine thrummed beneath her, a living, breathing beast. For those 10 exhilarating minutes, she was free, untethered, soaring. The sensation was intoxicating, a revelation. The hesitant interest of her childhood exploded into an undeniable passion. She knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her bones, that she had to fly. This was not just a fleeting fancy, this was her destiny calling, a clear, resonant note in the vast silence of her future. The sky, once an indifferent expanse, had become a beckoning, limitless frontier. The decision was made, resolute and unyielding. Amelia Earhart, no longer content to merely observe, plunged headfirst into the world of aviation. The year 1920 marked the true beginning of her journey skyward. She worked tirelessly, saving every spare penny from various jobs: photographer, truck driver, stenographer to finance flying lessons. The smell of gasoline and oil became a familiar perfume, the roar of the radial engine a comforting lullaby. Her first instructor was Netta Snook, one of the few female aviators of the era, a woman of steely resolve and quiet competence. Under Snook's tutelage, Amelia quickly proved to be an adept student. She absorbed every lesson, every nuance of control, with an almost ferocious concentration. The physical sensation of the stick in her hand, the rudder pedals beneath her feet, the delicate dance between man and machine against the invisible currents of the air, it was an intricate ballet she mastered with burgeoning grace. The wind, once a gentle whisper, now sang through the wires of the biplane, a triumphant chorus. In 1921, a year after her first flight, Amelia purchased her very own aircraft, a bright yellow Kinner Airster biplane. She affectionately named it, the Canary. It was a modest machine, but to Amelia, it represented absolute freedom, a tangible manifestation of her dreams. The canary yellow paint gleamed under the California sun, a beacon of her ambition. She spent countless hours with it, not just flying, but intimately learning its mechanics, its quirks, its very soul. She understood that to truly master the sky, one must first master the machine. The rhythmic cough and sputter of its engine, the vibrating hum of its wings, became extensions of her own heartbeat. With the Canary, Amelia began to truly hone her skills. She obtained her pilot's license from the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale in 1921, a prestigious recognition of her capabilities. The following year, 1922, saw her break her first aviation record for women, soaring to an altitude of 14,000 feet. The air thinned, the engine strained, but Amelia pushed the Canary higher, beyond what any woman had achieved before. The world below became a distant, hazy map, and above, only the limitless blue. This was followed by another record in 1923, becoming the 16th woman in the United States to be issued a pilot's license by the FAA. These were not grand, global statements, but they were crucial steps, solidifying her reputation within the nascent aviation community as a serious, dedicated, and exceptionally skilled aviator. She was no longer just a woman who flew, she was a pilot who happened to be a woman, and a very good one at that. The true turning point, however, arrived in 1928. A telephone call, seemingly innocuous, shattered the quiet rhythm of her life and catapulted her onto the global stage. It was from Captain Hilton H. Rayleigh, acting on behalf of an anonymous sponsor. "How would you like to be the first woman to fly the Atlantic?" he asked. The question hung in the air, electric with possibility. Amelia, ever practical, knew the historical weight of such an endeavor. Charles Lindbergh's solo flight the previous year had captured the world's imagination, transforming him into a living legend. This was an opportunity of a lifetime. Yet, there was a caveat. She would be a passenger, not the pilot. A wave of disappointment, sharp and immediate, washed over her. Her entire being yearned for the controls, for the absolute command of the aircraft. But the pragmatic side of her recognized the immense value of the experience, the exposure, the chance to be part of something monumental. She accepted. On June 17, 1928, Amelia Earhart, along with pilot Wilmer Stultz and co-pilot Louis Gordon, embarked on the transatlantic flight in the Fokker FBI 3 meters, aptly named Friendship. The journey was arduous, shrouded in thick fog and driving rain for much of the 20-hour, 40-minute flight from Trepassey Harbour, Newfoundland, to Bury Port, Wales. Amelia, relegated to the passenger seat, felt a profound frustration. She was an observer, charting the course on maps, but not truly flying. The roar of the engines, the vibrations shaking the fuselage, the endless gray expanse of the ocean below it was an experience of profound awe mixed with a gnawing sense of being unfulfilled. Upon landing, the world exploded. News of the Friendship's successful crossing spread like wildfire. Amelia Earhart, the elegant, unassuming woman with the striking resemblance to Lindbergh, was instantly dubbed Lady Lindy by the press. She was thrust into the blinding spotlight of international fame, a celebrity overnight. The novelty of this attention was exhilarating, yet it also carried a subtle sting. She had crossed an ocean, yes, but she hadn't flown it. The distinction was crucial to her, a quiet but insistent drumbeat in her soul. The post-Atlantic fame of 1928 was a whirlwind, a dizzying ascent into the rarefied air of global celebrity. Amelia, still somewhat bewildered by the suddenness of it all, found herself swept up in a relentless tide of public appearances, interviews, and accolades. The moniker, Lady Lindy, clung to her, a double-edged sword that granted instant recognition but also subtly undermined her own unique identity as an aviator. She was admired, celebrated, but she yearned to be known for her skill, her daring, her own accomplishments, not merely as a female echo of a male hero. It was during this period that her strategic partnership, and eventual profound personal connection, with George P. Putnam truly blossomed. Putnam, a prominent publisher, publicist, and explorer, was a master orchestrator of public image. He saw in Amelia not just a skilled pilot, but a compelling narrative, a symbol of modern womanhood and adventure. He took her raw talent and quiet determination and meticulously crafted her public persona, ensuring that her story resonated with the masses. He managed her engagements, negotiated her deals, and became her unwavering advocate, shielding her from the more predatory aspects of newfound fame while amplifying her message. Their relationship, initially professional, deepened with shared ambition and mutual respect. He understood her restless spirit, her insatiable drive to push boundaries, and he became the anchor that allowed her to soar. Their bond transcended business. In 1930, George Putnam proposed. Amelia, ever independent, initially hesitated. She valued her freedom, her autonomy, above all else. But Putnam was different. He understood her need for independence, for a partner who would support her dreams, not stifle them. Their wedding in 1931 was a quiet affair, a testament to their practical, no-nonsense approach to life and love. She famously wrote him a letter on their wedding day, expressing her reservations about marriage but her commitment to their partnership. "You must know again my reluctance to marry, my feeling that I shattered thereby in many ways the few satisfactions I have achieved with my career. You must also know how honestly I have struggled to avoid this joining of our lives. Yet," she concluded, "I shall not hold you to a medieval code of faithfulness to me, nor shall I consider myself bound to you." It was a declaration of fierce independence, and Putnam, a man ahead of his time, understood and respected it. Together, they formed an formidable team, a powerhouse couple navigating the burgeoning world of aviation and celebrity. Despite the triumphs and the carefully curated public image, the memory of that transatlantic flight as a mere passenger gnawed at Amelia. She knew she was capable of more, that her true mettle as a pilot had yet to be fully tested on the global stage. The need to prove her own capabilities, to shed the Lady Lindy tag and establish her own legend, became an intense, burning desire. The opportunity came in 1932. 5 years after Lindbergh's epic solo flight, Amelia set her sights on doing the same. On May 20, 1932, exactly 5 years to the day after Lindbergh, Amelia Earhart took off from Harbor Grace, Newfoundland, in her bright red Lockheed Vega. The weather was brutal, a relentless assault of icy rain and dense fog. The engine began to sputter, choking on ice that formed on the wings and propeller. The altimeter malfunctioned, sending her into a terrifying, uncontrolled spin towards the churning Atlantic below. The air in the cockpit grew frigid, the cold seeping into her bones, threatening to numb her senses. She fought against the elements, against the failing instruments, against the creeping tendrils of fear. Her hands, encased in thick gloves, gripped the controls with white-knuckled determination. The roar of the engine, when it did catch, was a momentary reassurance against the vast, indifferent silence of the ocean. She knew, with every fiber of her being, that this was the moment of truth, the ultimate test of her skill and resilience. After nearly 15 hours of battling the unforgiving sky, exhausted but triumphant, Amelia spotted land. Not her intended destination in Paris, but a small pasture near Culmore, Northern Ireland. She brought the Vega down in a farmer's field, the red plain a startling splash of color against the verdant green. The landing was rough, but safe. A stunned farmer approached, bewildered by the sight of a woman climbing out of an airplane in his field. "Where have you come from?" he asked. "From America," Amelia replied, her voice hoarse with fatigue but vibrant with victory. The news of her solo transatlantic flight electrified the world. This time, there was no ambiguity. Amelia Earhart had flown the Atlantic, alone, braving unimaginable perils. She had not only equaled Lindbergh's feat but, in many ways, surpassed it, doing so with less sophisticated equipment and facing even more treacherous conditions. The Lady Lindy comparisons faded, replaced by a genuine recognition of her as a pioneer, a courageous aviator in her own right. She had achieved her vindication, solidifying her status as a global icon and record breaker, a symbol of courage and an inspiration to women everywhere. The roar of the ocean, the sting of the ice, the fear and the spin all faded into the background, replaced by the profound satisfaction of a dream realized, a challenge conquered. The sky, truly, was hers. The years between 1932 and 1936 were a testament to Amelia Earhart's relentless spirit and unyielding ambition. Her solo transatlantic flight had cemented her legendary status, but she was never one to rest on her laurels. The exhilaration of breaking one barrier only fueled her desire to conquer the next. The sky was still vast, filled with uncharted routes and untouched records, and Amelia intended to claim them. In January 1935, she achieved another historic first, the first person, male or female, to fly solo from Hawaii to California. The Pacific Ocean, a shimmering, seemingly endless expanse of blue, presented a formidable challenge. It was a flight of immense solitude, 13 hours and 15 minutes suspended between two distant points, with only the rhythmic hum of her Lockheed Vega for company. The stark beauty of the ocean, stretching to the horizon in every direction, was both awe-inspiring and terrifying in its indifference. Navigation over such a vast, featureless expanse required meticulous planning and unwavering concentration. She felt the profound weight of her responsibility, not just to herself, but to the burgeoning community of female aviators she championed. The successful landing in Oakland was met with jubilant crowds, a testament to her growing stature as an aviation trailblazer. This flight, perhaps more than any other, demonstrated her mastery of long-distance navigation and her profound resilience in the face of isolation. Beyond her personal aerial achievements, Amelia was a fierce advocate for women in aviation. She understood the power of her platform and used it tirelessly to open doors for others. She was a founding member and the first president of the 99s, an organization of licensed women pilots dedicated to mutual support and the advancement of women in aviation. Her voice, articulate and passionate, resonated in lecture halls and boardrooms, challenging societal norms and inspiring a generation of women to pursue their own ambitions, whether in the cockpit or elsewhere. She believed profoundly in the equal capabilities of women, not as a matter of rhetoric, but as a lived reality. The scent of lecture halls, mingled with the faint, lingering scent of aviation fuel on her clothes, became a symbol of her dual role as pilot and pioneer. Her commitment to the future of aviation extended beyond flying. In 1935, she accepted a position as a visiting faculty member and career counselor at Purdue University. It was an unusual role for a celebrity aviator, but one that appealed to her intellectual curiosity and her desire to contribute to the scientific and educational aspects of flight. She saw aviation not just as a sport or a daring feat, but as a vital field for research and development. It was at Purdue that the seeds of her ultimate ambition truly took root. The university, recognizing her vision, provided funds for the acquisition of a cutting-edge aircraft, a Lockheed Electra 10E, a sleek, twin-engine marvel of aviation engineering. This Electra, christened her Flying Laboratory, was no ordinary plane. It was specifically designed and meticulously modified for one monumental purpose: to circumnavigate the globe at the equator, a feat never before accomplished. Under the watchful eyes of aviation technical advisor Paul Mantz and her trusted mechanic Clarence D.M. Gardner, the Electra underwent extensive transformations. The passenger seats were stripped out, replaced by massive fuel tanks that would extend its range across vast oceans. The navigation equipment was upgraded, the radio systems enhanced. Every detail was scrutinized, every component strengthened, every contingency planned for. The air in the Burbank hangars was thick with the smell of new metal, fresh paint, and the quiet hum of intense, focused work. Amelia spent countless hours with Mance and Gardner, poring over blueprints, discussing modifications, her mind already charting the invisible lines across oceans and continents. The plane, a silver bird of immense promise, became an extension of her own audacious dream. The growing anticipation for this monumental journey was palpable, a shared excitement among her team and the public alike, but for Amelia, it was a profound, almost spiritual quest, the ultimate challenge, the final frontier. March of 1937 arrived, bringing with it the fever pitch of anticipation for the inaugural attempt at the circumnavigation. The Lockheed Electra, gleaming under the California sun, stood ready at Oakland, a testament to years of dreaming, planning, and meticulous engineering. The team was assembled: Amelia, the pilot; Fred Noonan, the seasoned navigator, his reputation as a master of celestial navigation preceding him; Harry Manning, an experienced maritime navigator; and Frank LaGuardia, the co-pilot, a steady hand. The atmosphere was electric, a blend of nervous excitement and unwavering confidence. The hum of the crowd, the flashing of cameras, the shouted goodbyes, it was a scene of historic moment. The first leg of the journey, from Oakland, California, to Honolulu, Hawaii, was a triumph. The Electra soared across the Pacific, a silver dart against the endless blue. The flight was smooth, a testament to the plane's capabilities and the crew's skill. Amelia felt the familiar thrill of the controls in her hands, the vastness of the ocean stretching beneath them. Noonan's navigation was precise, guiding them flawlessly across the watery expanse. The landing in Hawaii was met with cheers, a successful start to what promised to be an epic journey. Relief washed over the crew, a shared sense of accomplishment. They had conquered the first formidable stretch. But fate, capricious and cruel, had a different plan. 3 days later, on March 20th, as the Electra was preparing for its next leg, the arduous flight to Howland Island disaster struck. During a takeoff attempt from Luke Field in Honolulu, a catastrophic ground loop occurred. The precise cause remains debated: a burst tire, a collapsed landing gear, or perhaps a sudden crosswind catching the heavy, fully fueled aircraft. Whatever the trigger, the result was horrifying. The metallic shriek of tearing aluminum, the sickening lurch as the plane spun violently out of control, the desperate roar of engines fighting against an invisible force. Amelia, at the controls, fought valiantly, but the momentum was too great. The Electra slammed back onto the runway, its left wingtip and landing gear severely damaged, propeller blades mangled. The silence that followed the crash was deafening, a stark contrast to the earlier cheers of triumph. Dust settled over the mangled aircraft, a silent testament to shattered hopes. Amelia climbed out, shaken but unhurt, her heart heavy with a profound disappointment. The dream, so meticulously constructed, so close to fruition, lay broken on the tarmac. The damage to the Electra was extensive, rendering it impossible to continue the west to east circumnavigation. The decision was agonizing but inevitable: the attempt was cancelled. The hope that had filled the air just days before was replaced by a crushing wave of frustration and despair. The fragility of grand plans, the sudden caprice of fortune, it was a bitter lesson. Yet, even in the depths of disappointment, a flicker of Amelia's unyielding resolve remained. This was a setback, not an end. The sky still beckoned, and she would find another way to answer its call. If you're enjoying this historical journey, remember to subscribe for more fascinating stories of courage and mystery. The twisted metal of the Electra's left wing, the mangled propeller blades, the sickening cant of the fuselage where the landing gear had collapsed, these were not merely mechanical failures. They were shards of a shattered dream, glinting cruelly under the Hawaiian sun. The air, thick with the scent of aviation fuel and the lingering dust of the runway, felt heavy, oppressive. Amelia climbed out of the cockpit, her movements stiff, her face a mask of profound disappointment. The roar of the crash had faded, replaced by a terrible, echoing silence in her ears, louder than any engine. It was March of 1937, and the first attempt at circumnavigation, barely begun, was irrevocably over. George P. Putnam, Amelia's husband and the architect of her public image, arrived swiftly at Luke Field. His usual brisk, confident demeanor was tempered by a visible weariness, a slight slump to his shoulders that betrayed the weight of this setback. He surveyed the damage, his gaze practical, assessing the material loss, but his eyes held a deeper concern for Amelia. He knew the depth of her ambition, the years of meticulous planning and relentless effort poured into this very moment. He found her standing a little apart from the small crowd that had gathered, her arms crossed, staring at the wounded aircraft as if it were a fallen comrade. "It's bad, Amelia," he said, his voice low, devoid of his usual effusive pronouncements. She merely nodded, her jaw tight. "Beyond repair here, she needs to go home." The decision was made with a chilling efficiency born of necessity. The Lockheed Electra, a symbol of boundless possibility just days before, was carefully dismantled, crated, and shipped back to the mainland, destined for the familiar hangars of Burbank, California. The journey across the Pacific, intended as a triumphant aerial passage, became instead a somber, inglorious maritime transport. Each clang of the crane, each creak of the ship's hull carrying the damaged plane, was a fresh wound to Amelia's spirit. The initial wave of public excitement had turned into a collective sigh of disappointment, a pervasive sense of anticlimax that Amelia felt keenly. The Lady Lindy persona, so carefully cultivated, now felt fragile, susceptible to the whispers of failure. Back in California, the atmosphere in the Burbank hangar was a stark contrast to the celebratory send-offs. The Electra, now a patchwork of scarred aluminum and exposed wiring, sat like a patient awaiting major surgery. The air was thick with the metallic tang of damaged parts and the faint, sweet smell of despair. But Amelia Earhart was not one to wallow. Her disappointment, though profound, was quickly transmuted into a steely resolve. "We will try again," she declared to Putnam, her voice unwavering, though her eyes still held the ghost of the recent crash. Putnam, ever the pragmatist, nodded. "But we must learn from this, Amelia. Re-evaluate everything." Their discussions were long, intense, and punctuated by the quiet hum of the hangar. The west-to-east route, initially chosen for its favorable wind patterns in the earlier stages, now seemed cursed. There were also logistical complexities, particularly the need to fly over specific regions during certain seasons to avoid monsoons. After much deliberation, consulting with aviation experts and meteorologists, a crucial decision was made. They would reverse the direction. An east-to-west route, starting from the continental United States, would allow them to tackle the formidable Pacific crossing last, when the plane was lighter, having burned off most of its fuel. This strategic pivot was not just about winds, it was a psychological reset, a conscious break from the jinxed first attempt. Fred Noonan, Amelia's navigator, was integral to these discussions. He was a man of quiet competence, his face often etched with the deep lines of concentration that came from years of staring at charts and stars. He had been on the Electra during the Hawaiian accident, a silent witness to the near disaster. He carried his own burden of disappointment, but also an unshakable belief in the mission. His experience in maritime navigation, honed over years on the open seas, made him invaluable for the vast, featureless expanses of the Pacific. Harry Manning and Frank LaGuardia, the navigators from the first attempt, respectfully stepped aside, their roles concluded. The circumnavigation would now rest squarely on the shoulders of Amelia and Noonan. The pressure on Noonan was immense. The lives of two people, and the success of a globally watched endeavor, would depend entirely on his ability to guide them across thousands of miles of ocean. He accepted the challenge with a stoic nod, his gaze already fixed on the invisible lines of latitude and longitude that crisscrossed the globe. The weight of the challenge ahead settled over them both, a quiet, pervasive presence in the hangar, but it was a weight they were determined to carry. The spring days bled into May, then June 1, 1937, a relentless march of time marked by the rhythmic clang and hiss of the Burbank hangar. This was not merely a repair job, it was a rebirth. Under the expert guidance of Paul Mantz, the renowned Hollywood stunt pilot and aviation technical advisor, and the meticulous hands of Clarence D.M. Gardner, Amelia's trusted mechanic, the Lockheed Electra 10E was stripped down and rebuilt, transformed from a damaged bird into a stronger, more resilient machine. Mantz, with his sun-weathered face and an air of unflappable competence, oversaw the structural repairs. He moved with a quiet authority, his eyes missing nothing, his hands often tracing the lines of the fuselage, feeling for imperfections. D.M. Gardner, a man whose hands seemed to possess an almost intuitive understanding of metal and machinery, worked tirelessly, often late into the night. The hangar air was a symphony of industry, the soft rasp of sandpaper, the sharp crack of a rivet gun, the low hum of machinery, and the ever-present, pungent aroma of aviation fuel, solvents, and freshly cut metal. Every damaged component was either repaired to exacting standards or replaced. The left wing, which had borne the brunt of the ground loop, was painstakingly reconstructed, its skin smoothed, its internal structure reinforced. But the modifications went far beyond mere repair. This was a flying laboratory, and its purpose was to conquer the globe. Fuel capacity became paramount. The Electra's passenger seats, already removed for the first attempt, were not reinstalled. Instead, the entire fuselage became a labyrinth of custom-built fuel tanks, expanding the aircraft's range to an unprecedented degree. The cabin, once a space for humans, now smelled faintly of gasoline, a constant reminder of the volatile cargo they would carry. DM Gardner personally oversaw the installation and calibration of these auxiliary tanks, ensuring every connection was secure, every valve leak-proof. He understood the stakes. A single faulty line could mean the end. Navigation equipment was also upgraded. A new astrodome was fitted, a clear bubble on the roof of the cockpit, allowing Fred Noonan an unobstructed view of the celestial sphere for his star sights. Drift sights, radio direction finders, and a comprehensive array of instruments were installed or fine-tuned. The radio systems, notoriously temperamental in the 1930s, received particular attention. Though still limited by the technology of the era, every effort was made to enhance their range and reliability, a silent acknowledgement of the vast, empty stretches of ocean they would soon traverse. Amelia, not content to merely observe, was a constant presence in the hangar. She wasn't just the pilot, she was the project manager, the visionary. She discussed every modification with Mance and Gardner, her intelligent gaze absorbing technical drawings, her questions precise and insightful. She knew her aircraft intimately, understood its every nuance, its every potential strength and weakness. In the quiet hours, away from the din of the workshop, Amelia and Fred Noonan would pore over their charts, spread across a large table in a small, cluttered office adjacent to the hangar. The maps, vast and detailed, covered continents and oceans, crisscrossed with penciled lines representing their proposed route. Noonan, with his encyclopedic knowledge of celestial navigation, would explain the intricacies of star sights, sun lines, and drift calculations. His finger would trace imaginary arcs across the Pacific, pointing out potential hazards, discussing contingency plans. Amelia listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was a superb pilot, but the success of this mission hinged equally on Noonan's ability to guide them to a speck of land in the middle of an ocean. They practiced radio calls, rehearsed emergency procedures, their voices low and serious, their trust in each other deepening with every shared calculation, every quiet discussion. The air in that room was thick with the scent of old paper and fresh pencil lead, a tangible manifestation of their meticulous preparation. As the departure date loomed, the pressure mounted. There were final public appearances, farewell dinners, a relentless barrage of press conferences. Amelia, ever gracious, smiled for the cameras, answered the inevitable questions about fear and ambition, but beneath the composed exterior, a quiet solemnity had settled. She met with friends like Betty Backus, sharing quiet moments, unspoken goodbyes. Jean Vidal, an aviation official and a steadfast friend, offered words of encouragement, his concern masked by professional cheer. George, her rock, was constantly by her side, managing the logistics, shielding her from excessive demands, his hand a reassuring presence on her arm. The farewells were tinged with a subtle apprehension, a shared understanding of the immense undertaking. The roar of the Electra's engines during a final test flight, a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through the hangar floor, was no longer just a sound of power. It was the beat of an impending journey, a call to the unknown. June 1, 1937. The air in Miami, Florida, was thick with the humid promise of summer and the electric crackle of anticipation. The Lockheed Electra 10E, now a gleaming silver bird, stood poised on the runway, its twin engines humming with barely contained power. The crowd, held back by ropes, buzzed with excitement, their faces upturned, eager witnesses to history. Amelia Earhart, dressed in her characteristic practical flying suit, looked serene, almost ethereal, as she walked towards the aircraft. Beside her, Fred Noonan carried his navigation kit, a leather satchel that held the tools of their survival. The scent of salt from the nearby ocean mingled with the heady aroma of high-octane fuel. The takeoff was flawless. The Electra roared down the runway, gathering speed, then lifted gracefully into the azure sky, a silver arrow aimed eastward. The ground fell away, the cheering crowd shrinking into a colorful mosaic. Amelia felt the familiar surge of exhilaration as the controls responded to her touch, the vastness of the sky opening before them. This was it. The east-to-west circumnavigation had officially begun. The initial legs were a testament to their meticulous preparation and burgeoning teamwork. Miami to San Juan, Puerto Rico. Then, across the shimmering expanse of the Caribbean Sea, to Natal, Brazil. The flight over the clear turquoise waters, dotted with emerald islands, was breathtaking, a stark contrast to the concrete jungles they had left behind. Noonan's navigation was precise, guiding them unerringly to each waypoint. Amelia flew with a calm competence, her hands steady on the yoke, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon, the instruments, and the vast, shifting canvas of the sky. The most daunting early challenge was the Atlantic crossing, a vast, featureless stretch of water that had claimed so many before. From Natal, they pointed the Electra's nose towards Africa, a journey of thousands of miles over open ocean. For long hours, there was nothing but the endless blue below and the boundless blue above, broken only by the occasional cloud formation. The rhythmic drone of the engines became a comforting lullaby, a constant reminder of their forward momentum. Amelia often glanced at Noonan, absorbed in his charts, his sextant poised, his calculations a silent language of their shared purpose. There was a quiet confidence that grew between them, a symbiotic rhythm of pilot and navigator. They were a single unit, two minds focused on one monumental task. Upon making landfall in Africa, first in Dakar, then pushing eastward across the continent, the landscape transformed dramatically. The lush greenery of the coastal regions gave way to the ochre hues of the desert, then to the dense, verdant expanse of the African interior. They navigated treacherous weather fronts, landed on remote airfields where curious locals gathered to gawk at the silver bird, and refueled with the help of local ground crews. The heat was often stifling, the dust pervasive, but their progress was relentless. From Africa they pressed on across the Indian subcontinent, touching down in Karachi, then Calcutta. The exotic scents of spices and distant wood smoke, the vibrant colors of bustling markets, the sheer density of human life, it was a sensory overload, a stark reminder of the diverse world they were traversing at incredible speed. With each successful leg, with each landing and takeoff, a powerful sense of momentum built. The early successes, though hard-won, filled them with a quiet triumph, a growing confidence in their abilities and in the steadfast reliability of their Electra. The ghost of the Hawaiian crash began to recede, replaced by the exhilarating rhythm of a successful expedition unfolding. The journey pressed on, a relentless eastward push across the globe. From the vibrant, chaotic beauty of the Indian subcontinent, Amelia and Noonan plunged into the humid, often unforgiving skies of Southeast Asia. The dates blurred into a continuous tapestry of flight, landing, refueling, and takeoff. June 13th, then the 14th, the 15th, and so on, until the end of the month. The Electra, though performing admirably, was now a veteran of thousands of miles, its silver skin streaked with exhaust and dust, a testament to its arduous passage. The landscapes beneath them shifted with dizzying speed. Rangoon, Burma, with its glittering Shwedagon pagoda rising like a golden beacon. Bangkok, Thailand, where the heat pressed down from a sky often heavy with monsoon clouds. Singapore, a bustling port city, a strategic crossroads where east met west. Surabaya and Bandung in the Dutch East Indies, islands shrouded in tropical vegetation, their volcanic peaks often obscured by mist. Each destination brought new challenges, new sensory experiences. The air, already thick with the scent of aviation fuel, now carried the heavy, sweet perfume of jasmine, the pungent aroma of street food, or the damp, earthy smell of the jungle after a downpour. The weather became an increasingly demanding adversary. They encountered the fringes of the monsoon season, facing sudden, torrential rains that lashed against the Electra's windshield, reducing visibility to zero. Thunderstorms, massive and menacing, forced them to make difficult navigational decisions, either to fly around vast systems, adding precious miles in fuel consumption, or to push through turbulent air, testing the Electra's structural integrity and their own nerves. Amelia's piloting skills were constantly tested, her hands moving instinctively on the controls, coaxing the aircraft through buffeting winds and violent updrafts. Noonan, meanwhile, battled with the elements from his navigator's station, trying to snatch star sights through fleeting breaks in the clouds, his charts growing damp with sweat and condensation. Remote airfields, often little more than dirt strips carved out of the jungle or reclaimed from the sea, presented their own set of logistical complexities. Fuel, often of varying quality, had to be secured and filtered meticulously. Local ground crews, speaking a myriad of languages, communicated through gestures and the universal language of aviation. The sheer scale of international travel in the 1930s, without the benefit of modern communication or infrastructure, was immense. Every stop required painstaking coordination, often managed by George Putnam from afar, but executed by Amelia and Noonan on the ground. There were minor setbacks: a stubborn fuel pump requiring extra time for repair in one location, a sudden bureaucratic delay in another, a brief but nerve-wracking encounter with an uncooperative official. Each incident, though small in isolation, chipped away at their reserves of energy and patience. Fatigue became a constant companion. The long hours in the air, the constant vibration and drone of the engines, the mental strain of navigation and piloting, the endless cycle of packing and unpacking, greeting officials and planning the next leg, it all took a toll. Amelia, though outwardly composed, felt the deep ache in her bones, the pervasive tiredness that settled behind her eyes. Noonan, always meticulous, sometimes showed the strain in the slight tremor of his hand as he adjusted his sextant, or the brief, unfocused stare he would occasionally fix on the horizon. Yet, their persistence was unwavering. They maintained their schedule with remarkable discipline, their shared purpose overriding the physical and mental exhaustion. The robust preparation of the Electra, and their own profound resilience, shone through. Every mile covered, every challenge overcome, cemented their bond and propelled them closer to the ultimate test: the vast, indifferent Pacific. June 29, 1937. The air in Lae, New Guinea, was a heavy, suffocating blanket of tropical humidity, thick with the scent of damp earth, exotic flowers, and the distant, unseen jungle. The Lockheed Electra settled onto the crude airstrip, its tires kicking up red dust, its engines winding down with a final, weary sigh. The sun, a brutal orb in the vast blue sky, beat down mercilessly, reflecting off the aircraft's silver skin. Amelia and Noonan had arrived, completing the longest and most challenging segment of their journey so far, a triumphant traverse across continents and oceans, from the Atlantic to the very edge of the Pacific. Relief, profound and palpable, washed over Amelia as she cut the engines. The silence that followed was almost deafening after weeks of constant engine roar. She stretched, feeling the stiffness in her shoulders and neck, the deep thrum of fatigue resonating through her entire body. Noonan, ever the professional, was already consulting his charts, even before stepping out of the plane, his mind already on the next, most formidable leg. The ground crew, a mix of local islanders and a few European officials, approached, their faces a blend of awe and curiosity. The Electra, battered but unbroken, had brought them to this critical juncture. Lae was a small, remote outpost, a collection of corrugated iron buildings and thatched huts nestled beside the glittering expanse of the Huon Gulf. It was their last confirmed stop before the perilous, unprecedented crossing to Howland Island, a tiny sliver of land in the immense, featureless Pacific. The brief rest they afforded themselves was a precious commodity, a moment to gather strength before the ultimate test. Amelia spent her time not just resting, but also meticulously overseeing the final preparations. D.M. Gardner, her trusted mechanic, was not with them on this leg, so she relied on local mechanics, guiding them through the critical checks. Every fuel line, every engine component, every navigation instrument was re-examined. The Electra was topped off with every available drop of fuel, its tanks swollen to their maximum capacity, transforming it into a flying fuel drum. The pressure was immense, a tangible weight that settled over the small airfield. The next leg was over 2,500 miles of open ocean, a journey that would push both pilot and navigator to their absolute limits. Howland Island, their destination, was barely 2 miles long and half a mile wide, a minuscule target in the vastness. Finding it would be like finding a needle in a haystack, relying almost entirely on Noonan's celestial navigation and the temperamental radio signals from the Coast Guard cutter Itasca, stationed near the island. Amelia and Noonan spent hours poring over their charts again, their voices low, serious. They discussed the nuances of celestial navigation, the critical need for clear skies, the potential for unforeseen weather. Noonan emphasized the importance of their chronometers, the precise timekeeping essential for their calculations. Amelia, in turn, reviewed the radio frequencies, the protocols for communication with the Itasca. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a shared recognition of the immense risk they were about to undertake. The weight of history, of expectation, of their own soaring ambitions, rested heavily on their shoulders. In the quiet of the tropical night, with the drone of unseen insects and the distant murmur of the ocean as their only companions, Amelia stood outside her quarters, gazing up at the impossibly star-dusted sky. The Southern Cross hung low, a brilliant diamond against the velvet black. This was Noonan's domain, the celestial map that would guide them. A blend of profound relief at having reached Ley, and an intense, almost sickening anxiety about the daunting Pacific leg, churned within her. This was the culmination of her life's dream, the ultimate challenge she had sought. The thrill of it was intoxicating, but the risk was terrifying. She took a deep breath, the humid air filling her lungs, and felt a renewed surge of resolve. The sky beckoned, not just as a frontier, but as a destiny. They would fly. The pre-dawn gloom of July 2, 1937, clung to Ley like a shroud. A heavy, humid stillness permeated the air, thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying tropical foliage, and the metallic tang of high-octane aviation fuel. The air was pregnant with unspoken expectations, with the weight of a journey about to culminate or irrevocably falter. The Lockheed Electra 10E, now a silver leviathan against the encroaching light, stood on the crude airstrip, its tanks engorged to their bursting point, every drop of precious fuel carefully filtered and loaded. It sat low on its landing gear, a testament to the immense weight it carried, a vessel brimming with liquid fire. Amelia Earhart, her movements precise and unhurried despite the nervous energy thrumming beneath her skin, completed her final walk around. Her fingers, calloused from countless hours at the controls, brushed against the cool metal of the fuselage, a silent communion with the machine that was both her partner and her prison in the vastness ahead. The Electra hummed with a nascent power, the faint scent of engine oil mingling with the pervasive humidity. She checked the flaps, the ailerons, the landing gear, a ritual born of years of habit, a final assurance against the caprice of fate. Her gaze swept over the horizon, where the first faint blush of dawn was beginning to paint the eastern sky in hues of bruised violet and pale rose. Below, the Huon Gulf was a dark, restless sheet, waiting. Fred Noonan, stoic and focused, was already in the navigator's seat, his charts spread out before him, illuminated by the dim glow of the cockpit lights. His face, etched with the lines of relentless concentration, was a study in quiet determination. He double-checked his chronometers, adjusted his sextant, his movements economical and practiced. The weight of their combined destinies, the success of this monumental endeavor, rested heavily on his ability to pinpoint a speck of land in an ocean wider than any human had ever flown across in a straight line. The air in the cockpit was already warm, close, filled with the faint smells of leather, metal, and the unique, almost electric aroma of anticipation. The moment of departure arrived, heralded not by fanfare, but by the deep, guttural roar of the Electra's twin engines. Amelia, strapped into her pilot's seat, felt the familiar vibration course through her body, a powerful surge that both grounded and exhilarated her. She exchanged a brief, meaningful glance with Noonan, a silent acknowledgement of the monumental task ahead. Her hands, encased in soft leather gloves, gripped the yoke, her feet resting lightly on the rudder pedals. The runway, a rough strip of compacted earth, stretched before them, leading directly into the unknown. With a final, deep breath, Amelia advanced the throttles. The Electra shuddered, then lunged forward, gathering speed with immense effort, its heavy frame protesting against the pull of gravity. The roar of the engines intensified, shaking the very ground. The small crowd that had gathered, a handful of local officials, a few curious onlookers, blurred into a fleeting impression of upturned faces. The tail lifted, the nose nudged upward, and then, with a final, straining heave, the Electra broke free. It clawed its way into the brightening sky, slow and ponderous at first, a silver bird burdened by its precious cargo of fuel and dreams. The sun, a fiery orb, finally breached the horizon, painting the vast Pacific in a dazzling array of golds and oranges. Below, the Huon Gulf stretched out, then melted into the endless, shimmering expanse of the open ocean. Amelia felt a surge of exhilaration, the familiar thrill of liftoff magnified by the sheer scale of their undertaking. They were airborne, committed. The initial hours of the flight were a ballet of precision and focus. The Electra, now lighter as fuel was consumed, settled into a steady rhythm. The drone of the engines became a constant companion, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the airframe and into Amelia's bones. Noonan, perched in his astrodome, began his celestial observations, taking sunlines, carefully plotting their course. The sky was clear, initially, a boundless dome of blue, offering perfect conditions for his intricate calculations. His voice, calm and measured, would occasionally break the silence, relaying course corrections to Amelia. "A little to port, Amelia. Hold steady at 270. Amelia responded with crisp, efficient adjustments, her eyes scanning the array of instruments, ensuring their speed, altitude, and heading were perfectly maintained. The vast indifference of the ocean below was both beautiful and terrifying, an endless canvas of shifting blues and greens, devoid of any discernible landmarks. It was a world of pure navigation, a realm where even the slightest error could lead to disaster. Their first radio contact with the Coast Guard cutter Itasca, stationed near Howland Island, was a welcome sound. The crackle of static, then the clear, reassuring voice of the Itasca's radio operator, cutting through the vast silence. Amelia responded, her voice calm, professional, reporting their position and progress. Earhart to Itasca, position report, all well, on course to Howland. The exchange was brief, but it was a lifeline, a confirmation that they were not entirely alone in this immense void. It provided a momentary sense of security, a fragile thread connecting them to the world they had left behind and the tiny island they sought. The early confidence was high, a shared sense of purpose propelling them eastward, towards the invisible dot on the map. As the morning wore on, the sun climbed higher, beating down on the Electra's metal skin, turning the cockpit into a warm, enclosed space. The monotony of the flight began to settle in, the endless expanse of the Pacific stretching out in every direction, a vast, featureless canvas of blues and grays. The rhythmic drone of the engines, once a comforting sound, now became a relentless, hypnotic hum, an insistent presence that began to fray the edges of concentration. Amelia's eyes, though still sharp and focused, felt the strain of staring at the horizon, searching for any sign of change, any deviation in the endless uniformity. Then, the first subtle signs of trouble began to emerge. The radio, their crucial link to the Itasca and the outside world, started to become temperamental. Static, like 1,000 tiny needles, began to prickle through the headphones, making the Itasca's transmissions faint and often unintelligible. Amelia, her brow furrowed, adjusted the dials, tweaked the frequencies, but the problem persisted. The Itasca was trying to reach them, she knew, but the signals were breaking up, fading in and out, lost in a sea of crackle and hiss. Itasca, this is Electra. Say again. Your signal is weak. Her voice, usually so clear, now carried a subtle edge of frustration. The vast indifference of the ocean was not just visual, it was auditory, swallowing their vital communications. Noonan, meanwhile, faced his own battle against the elements. Clouds, initially scattered and wispy, began to gather, forming dense, towering formations that obscured the celestial sphere. His primary method of navigation relied on taking precise sights of the sun and stars, but with a solid overcast sky, this became impossible. He resorted to dead reckoning, estimating their position based on speed, heading, and elapsed time, but without regular celestial fixes, the accuracy of his calculations began to degrade. He pressed his face against the astrodome, his eyes straining, searching for even a fleeting glimpse of the sun or a star through a break in the clouds. The air in the astrodome was thick with his frustrated breaths, the glass misting slightly from the humidity. Visibility is closing in, Amelia, Noonan reported, his voice tight with concern. Can't get a fix. We're running on estimates. Amelia nodded, her grip on the yoke tightening. The vastness of the Pacific, once a symbol of freedom, now felt isolating, suffocating. They were alone, suspended between an indifferent sky and an even more indifferent ocean, their only guides a failing radio and increasingly unreliable celestial observations. The psychological state shifted from confident exhilaration to a growing undercurrent of concern, then to a palpable sense of vulnerability. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling heavier than the last, filled with the incessant drone of the engines and the maddening, intermittent static of the radio. The Electra, their flying laboratory, felt less like a symbol of progress and more like a fragile shell adrift in an endless void. The silence, when the radio briefly cut out entirely, was more terrifying than any noise. It was the silence of true isolation, the vast, empty silence of the Pacific. As the estimated time of their arrival at Howland Island drew closer, the tension in the cockpit became almost unbearable, a living, breathing entity that pressed in on Amelia and Noonan. The sun, now well past its zenith, began its slow descent towards the western horizon, casting long, ethereal shadows across the ocean surface. But there was no island in sight, only the endless, unbroken expanse of blue. The radio communications, once merely sporadic, had now degraded into a desperate, chaotic struggle. The Itasca, stationed near Howland, was attempting to guide them, blasting its radio beacon, sending out Morse code signals, but Amelia could barely make out fragments through the overwhelming static and interference. We are on the line 157,337. Repeat, on the line 157,337. We are running north and south. Amelia's voice, broadcast into the void, was strained, betraying the rising panic within her. The line 157,337 referred to a navigational line of position, indicating they were somewhere along that line, but not precisely where. It was a desperate plea for guidance, a half-formed puzzle piece in a rapidly disintegrating picture. From the Itasca, the crew listened, horrified, to Amelia's increasingly desperate calls. They transmitted continuously, trying to give her a bearing, a glimmer of hope. But the signals were conflicting, garbled by atmospheric conditions, by the limitations of their equipment, and perhaps by the sheer distance. The Itasca's radio operator, pale and sweating, shouted into his microphone, "Electra, Itasca. We hear you. Bearings are vague. Turn on your automatic direction finder." But Amelia, if she heard, could not respond clearly. The confusion was a thick, suffocating fog, obscuring not just their physical location but their very ability to communicate. Noonan, his face grim, peered through the astrodome, searching frantically for any break in the clouds that might allow a final, critical sunsight. His calculations, once so precise, were now based on increasingly long extrapolations, their accuracy diminishing with every passing minute. He muttered coordinates, rechecked his instruments, but the certainty was gone, replaced by a growing dread. "We should have seen it, Amelia. It should be there." His voice, usually so steady, now held a tremor of fear. The fuel gauge, a relentless, unforgiving arbiter of their fate, was plummeting. The needles edged relentlessly downward, a silent countdown to the inevitable. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drum against the dull ache of fatigue. The terrifying realization of being truly lost, suspended over an ocean that offered no quarter, began to set in. She banked the Electra, turning in slow, wide circles, hoping to catch sight of the island, hoping to pick up a stronger signal from the Itasca. Her eyes darted from the instruments to the vast horizon, then back again, a desperate dance between hope and despair. The air in the cockpit was thick with the scent of aviation fuel, now mixed with the acrid tang of fear. Every second was a critical juncture, a race against time and fading resources, and they were losing. The chaos of garbled radio calls and the silence of a missing island converged into a suffocating crescendo of dread. The final transmissions were not a crescendo, but a fading, broken whisper, a voice dissolving into the vast indifference of the Pacific. The Itasca crew, huddled around their radio receivers, strained to catch every fragment, every syllable, their faces etched with growing despair. The crackle and hiss of static were now interspersed with Amelia Earhart's voice, no longer calm and professional, but strained, urgent, tinged with a raw, undeniable panic. "Hack calling Itasca. Repeat, 157,337. Her voice, though still recognizable, sounded distant, as if already swallowed by the ocean. The phrase, "running north and south," was a desperate attempt to indicate their flight path, a hope that the Itasca could triangulate their position or at least understand their search pattern. A few agonizing minutes later, another fragmented burst. "We are circling, but cannot hear you. Go ahead on 3105. The request for a specific frequency, 3105 kilocycles, was a last-ditch effort to establish clearer communication, but it was a frequency not monitored by the Itasca. The air in the Itasca's radio room was thick with the scent of sweat and fear, the silence between Amelia's transmissions more chilling than any noise. The crew exchanged desperate glances, their hands hovering over their own transmission keys, unsure how to respond to such fragmented, desperate pleas. Then, the most heart-wrenching message, cutting through the static with chilling clarity, though still broken. "We are in the air. We are running on north and south." And then, an even more chilling addendum, a final, guttural cry that conveyed the full horror of their predicament. "Gas is running low." The words hung in the air, a stark, terrifying declaration of their impending doom. On board the Electra, Amelia's hands still gripped the yoke, her eyes, though weary, still scanning the featureless horizon, willing an island into existence. Noonan, his face pale, frantically peered through the astrodome, but there was only the vast, indifferent expanse of cloud and ocean. The fuel gauges were now hovering perilously close to empty, the twin engines, which had droned so reliably for thousands of miles, beginning to cough and sputter, their powerful roar weakening into an ominous gasp. The realization, cold and absolute, settled over them. They were lost, out of fuel, and the ocean awaited. The metallic tang of fear was now overpowering, a suffocating presence in the small cockpit. The final transmission, barely a whisper, was perhaps the most haunting. Hack to Itasca, we are now on the line. 157,337. We are listening but cannot hear you. We are about 100 miles out, and then, silence. Not a sudden, sharp cutoff, but a slow, agonizing fade, like a voice drifting away on the wind, until only the hiss of static remained. The Itasca crew continued to call, desperately, repeatedly, their voices hoarse with urgency, but there was no response. Only the hollow, empty sound of the ocean, stretching out endlessly, silently. The world held its breath, then let it out in a collective, agonizing gasp. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, and utterly terrifying. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan had vanished. The silence that descended after Amelia Earhart's final, fragmented transmissions was not merely the absence of sound, it was a gaping, terrifying void. On the bridge of the Coast Guard cutter Itasca, the initial disbelief quickly curdled into a dawning horror. The radio operators continued to call, their voices increasingly strained, but the response was only the mocking hiss of static, the vast, indifferent silence of the Pacific. Captain Lawrence Safford, responsible for the Itasca's mission, felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He had listened to those desperate calls, had tried to guide them, and now, nothing. The responsibility weighed on him like a physical burden. Immediate search and rescue efforts were launched, though they felt tragically inadequate against the immensity of the ocean. The Itasca, a single ship in an endless sea, began to systematically comb the designated search area, its searchlights cutting futile paths through the gathering twilight. Lookouts strained their eyes, scanning the choppy waves for any sign, a speck of metal, a patch of debris, anything that might betray the Electra's fate. The ship's few seaplanes, launched from catapults, flew low over the water, their pilots' hearts heavy with a desperate, fading hope. The vastness of the ocean, however, quickly swallowed their efforts. The air was thick with the smell of diesel fuel and the salt spray of the Pacific, a sensory backdrop to a rapidly unfolding tragedy. News of the disappearance, initially a whisper, then a frantic shout, rapidly reached the world. Putnam, back in California, received the devastating reports. His initial reaction was a fierce, almost guttural denial. No, he must have thought, not Amelia. Not after all this. But as the hours stretched into an agonizing eternity, and the frantic calls yielded no response, the brutal reality began to sink in. His face, usually so composed, crumpled with grief and a profound, sickening sense of helplessness. The phone lines buzzed with frantic inquiries from the press, but Putnam was beyond answering. He clung to the faintest sliver of hope, even as his heart told him the terrible truth. Across the United States, and indeed the globe, shock and disbelief rippled through communities. Amelia Earhart was more than just a pilot, she was an icon, a symbol of courage and female empowerment. Her disappearance was a personal blow to millions who had followed her journey with bated breath. Eleanor Roosevelt, a close friend and admirer, felt a deep ache in her heart. She had shared Amelia's vision for women, had cheered her on, and now, the vibrant spirit she so admired was gone. The First Lady immediately conveyed the gravity of the situation to her husband, President Franklin D. Roosevelt. President Roosevelt, recognizing the immense public concern and the historical significance of Amelia Earhart, acted swiftly and decisively. On July 3, 1937, he authorized a massive, unprecedented search operation. The full might of the United States Navy and Coast Guard was mobilized. Ships, aircraft, and personnel were diverted from their regular duties, ordered to converge on the Central Pacific. It was to be the largest and most expensive search and rescue operation in U.S. Navy history, a desperate, all-consuming effort to find the lost aviator. The urgency was palpable, a desperate race against the clock, against the vastness of the ocean, and against the rapidly diminishing hope of finding survivors. The dawning horror of a global tragedy had settled, casting a long, somber shadow across the world. The question of what had happened to Amelia Earhart became not just a personal tragedy, but a collective enigma, a haunting puzzle etched into the fabric of the 20th century. The vastness of the Pacific, once a shimmering canvas of possibility, had transformed overnight into an insatiable maw. The silence that followed Amelia Earhart's final, desperate transmissions was a profound, echoing void that swallowed hope whole. Captain Lawrence Safford, a man forged in the disciplined crucible of naval service, felt a cold dread settle deep in his gut. He had listened, helplessly, as the voice of a legend dissolved into static, and now, nothing. The responsibility, the crushing weight of a mission gone terribly wrong, pressed down on him with the force of a physical blow. His uniform, usually crisp, felt suddenly heavy, constricting. The salty tang of the ocean air, typically invigorating, now carried the bitter taste of failure. The immediate aftermath was a flurry of frantic, often futile, activity. The Itasca, a lone sentinel against the immensity, launched its limited resources into the gathering twilight. Searchlights, powerful but ultimately pathetic against the ocean's breadth, cut futile paths across the choppy waves. Lookouts, their eyes strained and bloodshot, scanned every swell, every trough, willing a piece of wreckage, a life raft, anything, to appear. The ship's few seaplanes, launched from their catapults with a desperate urgency, roared into the darkening sky, their pilots' hearts heavy with a rapidly fading hope. They flew low, their pontoons almost skimming the water, their gazes fixed on the endless blue, searching for a sign that simply wasn't there. The rhythmic drone of their engines, usually a symbol of purpose, now sounded like a mournful dirge. Back on the mainland, the news, initially a whispered rumor, then a shouted headline, ripped through the world. Putnam, Amelia's husband, her steadfast partner in ambition, received the devastating reports with a visceral, almost animalistic denial. No, he must have thought, the word a desperate, silent scream within his mind. Not Amelia, his usually composed demeanor shattered. His face, normally a study in shrewd calculation, crumpled with grief, his eyes wide with a profound, sickening sense of helplessness. The telephone lines in his office buzzed with frantic inquiries from a ravenous press, but Putnam was beyond answering. He sat, immobile, clinging to the faintest, most illogical sliver of hope, even as his heart told him the terrible, undeniable truth. The scent of stale cigar smoke in his office, usually a comfort, now felt cloying, suffocating. Across the United States, and indeed, across the globe, shock and disbelief rippled through communities. Amelia Earhart was more than just an aviator, she was an icon, a shining beacon of courage, a symbol of female empowerment that had inspired millions. Her disappearance was not merely a news story, it was a personal blow, a collective ache in the hearts of those who had followed her journey with bated breath. Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady, a close friend and admirer who had shared Amelia's vision for women breaking barriers, felt a deep, hollow ache in her own heart. She had cheered Amelia on, had seen in her a kindred spirit, and now, the vibrant, indomitable spirit she so admired was gone, vanished into thin air. Roosevelt, her voice tight with grief and concern. President Roosevelt, a leader acutely aware of public sentiment and the historical weight of Amelia Earhart's persona, acted swiftly and decisively. 9 ships, including battleships, destroyers, and tenders, converged on the Central Pacific. 66 aircraft, a formidable fleet of aerial scouts, were diverted from their regular duties, ordered to scour the vast, empty expanse around Howland Island. The urgency was palpable, a desperate, all-consuming race against the clock, against the vastness of the ocean, and against the rapidly diminishing hope of finding survivors. For the next 2 weeks, from July 3 to July 18, 1937, the Central Pacific became a theater of relentless, exhaustive effort. The search operation, the largest and most expensive in U.S. Navy history, unfolded with a grim determination. 9 ships, including the battleship USS Colorado and the aircraft carrier USS Lexington, systematically combed over 250,000 square miles of ocean. Imagine the scale, an area larger than the state of Texas, meticulously swept by human endeavor, all for 2 souls and a silver bird. The atmosphere at sea was one of grim, unyielding purpose. Sailors and airmen, their faces caked with salt spray and fatigue, worked around the clock. The relentless sun beat down from a sky that remained stubbornly, mockingly empty. The vastness of the ocean, stretching to the horizon in every direction, seemed to mock their efforts, swallowing every trace, every potential clue. The air was thick with the smell of diesel fuel, the metallic tang of ships' hulls, and the ever-present, pervasive scent of salt. From the decks of the ships, lookouts scanned the endless swells, their binoculars sweeping arcs across the water. The drone of aircraft engines was a constant presence, a mournful hum that filled the sky. Pilots, flying grueling, monotonous patterns, their eyes burning from the glare of the sun on the water, meticulously searched sector after sector. They flew at low altitudes, sometimes so low they could taste the salt on their lips, hoping to spot a life raft, a wing fragment, a splash of color against the uniform blue. Each plane carried a crew of observers, their faces pressed against the windows, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that time was running out. On board the Itasca, Captain Safford oversaw the coordination, his voice hoarse from endless commands, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. He felt the growing frustration, a gnawing despair that slowly, inexorably, began to replace the initial surge of urgent hope. Every new grid square searched, every empty horizon, chipped away at the resolve. The reports came in, monotonous in their negative findings. Nothing sighted. Area clear. No debris. The vastness of the ocean was overwhelming human endeavor, its indifferent power far surpassing their technology and their will. The psychological state of the crews shifted, slowly, painfully. Initial hope, fueled by the sheer scale of the operation, began to wane. Exhaustion set in, a deep, bone-weary fatigue that settled into every muscle, every thought. Frustration mounted, a silent, seething anger at the ocean's refusal to yield its secrets. The shift was agonizingly slow, from the desperate urgency of a rescue mission to the grim reality of a recovery operation, and then, inevitably, to the heartbreaking acceptance of loss. The sea had claimed them, utterly and completely. The sound of the waves crashing against the hulls of the ships, once a symbol of nature's power, now sounded like a slow, mournful tolling bell. By July 18, after 15 days of exhaustive, fruitless searching, the decision was made. The official search was called off. The order came down, heavy with unspoken grief and the bitter taste of defeat. The ships turned, their bows cutting through the waves, leaving behind only the empty ocean and an enduring, haunting question. The official cessation of the search on July 19, 1937, was not a sudden conclusion, but a slow, agonizing surrender. The news, when it finally reached the public, was met with a collective sigh of profound resignation. The hope, so fiercely held for 2 weeks, had finally been extinguished by the vast, indifferent Pacific. The world mourned, not with the sharp, immediate pain of a sudden death, but with the lingering ache of an unresolved tragedy. The absence of a body, of wreckage, of any definitive answer, left a wound that refused to heal. For George P. Putnam, the cessation of the official search was merely a bureaucratic formality. His personal search, driven by a raw, unyielding grief and a desperate need for answers, could not be called off. He was a man consumed, haunted by the image of Amelia, somewhere out there in the endless blue. His office, once a hub of bustling activity and strategic planning, now became a somber command center for a lonely, private war against the unknown. The scent of old paper and the lingering phantom of Amelia's perfume seemed to cling to the air, a constant reminder of her absence. Putnam poured his dwindling fortune into private searches, commissioning smaller vessels, hiring independent pilots. He meticulously reviewed every theory, every faint rumor, every potential lead, no matter how improbable. He contacted fishermen, islanders, anyone who might have seen something, heard something, anything that could offer a clue. His days were a relentless cycle of phone calls, telegrams, and meetings, his nights restless, haunted by what-ifs and if-onlys. The financial strain was immense, but he ignored it. Money was irrelevant compared to the unbearable weight of not knowing. His stubborn hope, a fragile flame flickering against the hurricane of reality, refused to be extinguished. He was driven by a love that transcended the physical, a desperate need to bring her home, or at least to find her final resting place. The public struggled to come to terms with the loss of their beloved, Lady Lindy. She had been more than just an aviator. She was a symbol of courage, of adventure, of the boundless human spirit. Her disappearance left a void in the national psyche, a lingering sense of bewilderment. How could someone so famous, so skilled, so utterly vibrant, simply vanish without a trace? Memorials were held, eulogies delivered, but they felt incomplete, lacking the closure that a definitive end would have provided. The newspapers, after weeks of sensational headlines, slowly began to relegate the story to inside pages, then to the realm of historical footnotes, but the public's fascination, the enduring ache of absence, persisted. For 2 long years, the mystery lingered. Putnam's private searches, though valiant, yielded nothing more than the official efforts. The ocean remained silent, inscrutable. Finally, in 1939, after an agonizing period of legal and emotional limbo, Amelia Earhart was officially declared dead. The pronouncement was a legal necessity, a final, somber acknowledgement of the undeniable truth, but it offered little solace. For Putnam, it was a bitter, formal end to a hope he had refused to abandon. For the world, it was the official closing of a chapter, but the story itself, the haunting question of what truly happened, had only just begun. The melancholic atmosphere of loss settled like a heavy fog, ensuring that Amelia Earhart would forever be remembered not just for her life, but for her mysterious disappearance. As the 1940s dawned, casting the long shadow of another world war across the globe, the immediate grief surrounding Amelia Earhart's disappearance began to recede, replaced by a persistent hum of speculation. The absence of any definitive wreckage or remains had created a fertile ground for theories, transforming her story from a tragic loss into an enduring enigma. The atmosphere became speculative, conspiratorial, a breeding ground for unanswered questions that would captivate generations. The official consensus, swiftly adopted by the U.S. Navy and the public in the immediate aftermath, was the crash and sink theory. It was the most straightforward, the most logical explanation in the face of no evidence. The Electra, running out of fuel, would have simply ditched into the vast Pacific. The ocean, with its immense depths and relentless currents, would have swallowed the aircraft whole, leaving no trace. The pressures of the deep, the corrosive power of saltwater, would have ensured that any wreckage would quickly disintegrate or be swept away. This theory offered a grim but simple closure, explaining the lack of evidence by the very nature of the environment. The image was stark, a silver bird, sputtering its last, plunging into the dark abyss, a final metallic shriek swallowed by the waves. However, almost immediately, other theories began to emerge, whispered at first, then gaining traction in the fertile soil of doubt. One of the most compelling was the castaway theory, centered around the remote, uninhabited island of Gardner Island, now known as Nikumaroro. This hypothesis suggested that Amelia and Fred Noonan, running critically low on fuel but still capable of controlled flight, might have spotted the small, flat coral atoll. With a desperate surge of skill, Amelia could have executed a belly landing on the exposed reef flat, perhaps at low tide. Stranded, they would have become castaways, living for a time on the desolate island, sending out sporadic distress signals until their radio batteries died or they succumbed to the elements. This theory offered a tantalizing glimmer of hope, a narrative of survival against impossible odds, even if it ended in tragedy. The idea of them living, however briefly, on a remote speck of land, battling for survival against the vastness, resonated with the human spirit. Then there was the more controversial, often sensationalized, capture theory. This theory, fueled by geopolitical tensions and the looming specter of war with Japan, proposed that Amelia and Noonan did not crash, but were intercepted and either shot down or captured by Japanese forces. The premise was that they might have strayed into Japanese-mandated territory in the Pacific, perhaps near the Marshall Islands, where Japan was secretly building military installations. The Japanese, paranoid about American reconnaissance, especially from an aircraft as advanced as the Electra, would have dealt with them swiftly and secretly. This theory often involved elaborate scenarios of imprisonment, torture, and even execution, becoming a staple of pulp fiction and tabloid headlines. It tapped into a pervasive wartime xenophobia and offered a more dramatic, almost conspiratorial, explanation for the complete lack of evidence. The psychological state here was one of intrigue, of questioning official narratives, a deep desire for a more exciting, perhaps even sinister, truth. Initial investigations into these theories were hampered by the limitations of the era. Forensic science was rudimentary, and the technology for deep-sea exploration or remote island archaeology was decades away. Military intelligence, particularly in the run-up to World War II, was secretive and often focused on more immediate threats, though reports of Japanese involvement were quietly investigated and generally dismissed as unsubstantiated rumors. The few independent researchers who delved into the mystery often struggled with limited resources, relying on anecdotal evidence, vague historical records, and sheer conjecture. The enduring mystery, therefore, was born not just from the disappearance itself, but from the lack of concrete answers, allowing these competing narratives to flourish and intertwine, each promising a different path to closure, each leaving a trail of tantalizing, unproven claims. The scent of old newspaper clippings, brittle with age, seemed to carry the faint echo of these early, unresolved debates, a constant reminder of the historical enigma. The 1980s brought with them a new era of technological advancement and a renewed, almost obsessive, focus on the Earhart mystery. The passage of time had not diminished the public's fascination, instead, it had deepened, transforming the story into a modern myth, a blank canvas onto which new generations could project their own desires for discovery and resolution. The atmosphere shifted from speculative to forensic, a relentless, persistent quest for definitive proof, marrying the romance of history with the rigor of modern science. At the forefront of these modern investigative efforts were dedicated individuals and organizations, fueled by an insatiable curiosity and the belief that the ocean, however vast, could not hold its secrets forever. Elgin Long, a former pilot himself, became one of the most prominent figures in this renewed pursuit. He dedicated decades of his life to meticulously re-examining every piece of historical data, every radio transmission log, every meteorological report. His approach was systematic, almost mathematical, driven by a pilot's understanding of flight mechanics and navigation. Long's work laid much of the groundwork for understanding the technical possibilities and limitations of Earhart's final flight, helping to refine the crash and sink theory with more precise calculations of fuel consumption and drift. His office, filled with maps, charts, and flight logs, smelled faintly of old paper and the quiet dedication of a scholar. But it was Richard Gillespie and the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery that breathed truly new life into the castaway theory, specifically focusing on Nikumaroro. Gillespie, with his background in aviation archaeology and his tireless dedication, transformed the investigation from armchair speculation into active, scientific expedition. TIGHAR's approach was interdisciplinary, combining historical research, forensic analysis, and cutting-edge technology. Their expeditions to Nikumaroro, beginning in the late 1980s and continuing for decades, were meticulously planned archaeological digs. Imagine the scene: a remote, uninhabited coral atoll, baking under the equatorial sun, its shores pounded by the relentless Pacific surf. TIGHAR teams, clad in expedition gear, meticulously combed the island, their movements slow and deliberate, their eyes scanning every inch of the rugged terrain. They used ground-penetrating radar to search for buried artifacts, metal detectors to locate metallic fragments, and forensic anthropologists to analyze any bone fragments discovered. The air on the island was thick with the scent of coral dust, salt, and the faint, earthy smell of ancient vegetation, a stark contrast to the sterile environment of a laboratory. Their discoveries, though often small and inconclusive on their own, collectively built a compelling, if circumstantial, case for the Nikumaroro hypothesis. They found fragments of what appeared to be cosmetic jars from the 1930s, a zipper pull that matched those used on Amelia's flying suit, and most significantly, bone fragments that, when forensically analyzed, showed characteristics consistent with a female of Earhart's stature and ethnic background. They also discovered evidence of a castaway campsite, including remnants of fires and tools, suggesting a period of survival. The meticulous quest for definitive proof was relentless. Deep-sea sonar surveys were conducted around the island, searching for the submerged wreckage of the Electra on the steep slopes of the atoll. The acoustic pings echoing through the deep, the faint images on the sonar screens, were the modern-day equivalent of the Itasca's desperate radio calls, a search for a ghost in the machine. The psychological state of these modern researchers was a complex blend of renewed hope, academic rigor, and a meticulous, almost reverent, dedication to Amelia's memory. They were driven not by sensationalism, but by a profound desire for historical accuracy, for the definitive truth. Each piece of evidence, each new analysis, fueled their resolve, pushing them further into the vast, silent archives of the past and the unforgiving environment of the present. The convergence of history and modern science, the patient, persistent pursuit of a 70-year-old mystery, transformed the enigma of Amelia Earhart into an ongoing, captivating scientific endeavor, a testament to the enduring power of unanswered questions. In the present day, the question of what happened to Amelia Earhart remains one of history's most captivating and enduring puzzles. Despite the tireless efforts of modern investigators, the meticulous archaeological digs, the advanced sonar scans, and the re-evaluation of every scrap of historical data, a definitive, universally accepted answer continues to elude us. Yet, paradoxically, this very unresolved mystery has only served to amplify her legend, cementing her place not just in aviation history, but in the broader cultural consciousness. Amelia Earhart's enduring legacy transcends the enigma of her disappearance. She stands as an unparalleled pioneer for women, a symbol of courage and exploration who shattered societal norms and inspired generations. Her life, lived boldly and without compromise, continues to resonate with a profound power. She was not just a pilot, she was an advocate, a lecturer, a career counselor at Purdue University, a woman who believed fiercely in the equal capabilities of all individuals, regardless of gender. Her articulate voice, her unwavering gaze, her distinctive, practical style, these images persist, embodying a spirit of audacious independence that remains as relevant today as it was in the 1930s. The impact of her life is woven into the fabric of modern aspiration. For every young girl who dreams of flight, for every woman who dares to challenge a traditional boundary, Amelia Earhart's spirit is a guiding light. She taught us that the sky is not the limit, but merely the beginning. Her records, her transatlantic flights, her ambitious circumnavigation attempt, these were not just feats of daring, but statements of possibility, declarations that the human spirit, when unfettered by convention, can achieve the extraordinary. The hum of jet engines overhead, the sight of a woman in a pilot's uniform, the very idea of pursuing an unconventional path all carry a faint echo of Amelia's pioneering spirit. Her story, steeped in both triumph and tragedy, holds a unique cultural resonance. It is a narrative of striving, of pushing boundaries, and ultimately, of vanishing into the unknown. The mystery itself has become a part of her appeal, adding a layer of captivating intrigue to an already remarkable life. It ensures that her name is never spoken without a pause, a moment of contemplation, a silent question mark hanging in the air. The vast, indifferent Pacific that swallowed her Electra has, in a strange twist of fate, also preserved her legend, preventing a mundane end and instead crafting an enduring myth. In the quiet moments of reflection, one can still imagine her, soaring above the clouds, a silver bird against the boundless blue, her eyes fixed on the horizon, ever reaching for the next frontier. The wind, whipping past the wings of an aircraft, seems to carry a whispered echo of her famous words, "Please know that I am aware of the hazards. I want to do it because I want to do it. Women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, their failure must be but a challenge to others." Amelia Earhart, the woman who defied gravity and convention, remains an enigma, a testament to the allure of the unknown. Her disappearance, rather than diminishing her, has elevated her to the realm of legend, a constant reminder that some stories, like the vast ocean itself, are meant to remain boundless, forever captivating, forever inspiring a lasting sense of wonder and admiration for a spirit that dared to fly beyond the known world. The question of what happened to her ensures that her name, and her extraordinary journey, will continue to be whispered, debated, and revered, an enduring historical puzzle that refuses to be solved, keeping her forever airborne in the collective imagination.